Hey, what is up, fellow anti-netters and my fellow shitweasels? Hello. What I want to share with you today is something. I got a YouTube comment the other day about. They asked me, "Hey, Scott, what do you mean by the short-term knowledge development and long-term knowledge development with a Zettelkasten?" And what this individual was referring to is in the beginning of my book, the Anti-Net Zettelkasten book. I talk about and I make reference to something called short-term knowledge development and long-term knowledge development. And so here's the deal. The Zettelkasten, and specifically the anti-net Zettelkasten, falls within a subclass, a subcategory of something known as analog knowledge development, AKD. This is separate from PKM, which is, all the Obsidian bubble graph boys and, second brainers and logseek, workflow warriors and metatag, metadata, workflow junkies and all of those, bubble graph boys out there. That's like PKM. AKD, analog knowledge development, is that of using handwritten knowledge development tools like the Ryan Holiday or Robert Greene notebox note card system, which is really kind of stupid that their name would even be associated with it. Like scholars have been doing that since like the 1500s, or like John Locke's analog knowledge development system, where he uses like a specific type of commonplace book and indexes things using commonplace books. Like, for instance, those Moleskine notebooks right there, that I've been using since like 2006, right? And even like getting out your thoughts on yellow legal pads, this falls within, analog knowledge development, AKD. This also follows, this is the anti-net Zettelkasten, right? A Lumanian Zettelkasten. That falls within AKD as well. Like down here, I have my chaos boxes and like vocab boxes, that I've been basically taking notes on and for my reading since like 2006. This also falls within AKD. So anyway, with that little, you know, I guess tutorial on AKD and analog knowledge development, I want to share with you what this individual was referencing. In page 367 of my book, Anti-Net Zettelkasten, I go into detail on short-term knowledge development versus long-term knowledge development. And there's a lot more details, and even like, this whole concept of short-term and long-term knowledge development is actually, it's actually comes from memory science, which I get into in like the later chapters, which is like, if you want to get like really boring, I've read like various memory books on like the science of memory, which is actually still quite an unknown and still a mystery, which is really fascinating. So anyways, now that we've gotten over that theoretical hubbub and all that stuff, I want to actually show you what I did yesterday. And I'm going to instantiate and show you a real life example of short-term knowledge development and long-term knowledge development. So I've been reading this book on my Amazon Kindle because I don't want to read it on on an iPhone or computer or whatever. This author, his name is Alen Sultanic, and this other guy named like Neckelius something. I don't know. I can look it up in the bib card, but I don't really want to right now. Anyway, these guys wrote a book called Automatic Clients, and it's like essentially it's a pretty good marketing book. So I've been reading it on my Kindle, and I want to show you the bib note I took yesterday, which is it came from page 130, and it said salesmanship in print. This is coined by a guy named John E. Kennedy, not John F. Kennedy, in the early 1900s, and it was his definition of advertising. Now, so here's where this came from. It like tells the story of John E. Kennedy and says salesmanship in print. Let me go back. Is like the definition. And this author, Alen Sultanic, who by all means seems to be a very proficient and smart marketer, he was very assertive in saying, no, like everyone else's definition of advertising is wrong. That is not what advertising is. Advertising is what, this guy says. It's salesmanship in print. So I was reading this and I was like, okay, yeah, I've heard that before, and I've actually created a card for that before. However, Alen Sultanic seems to, misunderstand actually the definition of advertising. And I've thought through this a lot. And so what I did was I created this bib note in reference page 130, which is, that's what you can see right there, page 130. And then I went to my old trusty Antinet Zettelkasten, and this is an example of essentially using it. Okay, so first off, I opened up my index, and I went to here. I'm going to hold this in my left hand because I'm kind of a renob when it comes to using things with my left hand. And by the way, a renob, in case you guys don't know what that means, a renob is boner spelled backwards, okay? And it's a little bit nicer term than calling yourself a retard. I guess retard is kind of like referred to as the R word these days. So don't say retard, say renob instead. Anyway, I looked up ad in advertising defined, and it navigated me to 5281/0, okay? So let's navigate over to 5281/0. And I actually, right before this video started, I actually opened this up, and I just want to show you what comes by way of. I'm going to put this down and show you. I need to do this using two hands because it's kind of difficult here. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here so you can actually see me actually use my Antinet Zettelkasten. So let me show you what I did. And I use these little, if you can see this, these little green note cards as placeholders. So I went over to 5281/0. Let's see here. Actually, when I put it back the other day, I actually put it back in the wrong place yesterday. So, oops. Well, this is a good example because this shows you, I very rarely do this. This is what happens when I make videos for others. This shows you how easy it is to like fix where things should be filed, because guess what? Every single freaking card has a card address in the top right. You see 5281/0. Okay, so I go to 5281/0. I'm going to pull out a bunch of these cards just to show you what I went through yesterday. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. There's a few more, but I don't want to get into that right now. A few more cards. Okay, so I essentially went into my Antinet Zettelkasten. Oh, shit. God damn it. I dropped one of my cards. Okay. It's kind of hard to do this with talking to you shit weasels at the same time and my fellow anti-netters. So I went to 5281. Let me put this back right here. And this is what I find. I find, okay, definitions of advertising. Advertising is multiplied salesmanship. This was apparently from Claude Hopkins. That's interesting. It's attributed to Claude Hopkins, whereas, basically we find that Robert E. Kennedy, at least according to Alen Sultanic, is the one who, had the quote. So there's already like long-term, thought development and knowledge development. We can compare and kind of like trace the real, true origin of the definitions of advertising. Okay. And then so this is my definition. I'll show you how I got to this. My definition is advertising is the mass in mass persuasion. And in my opinion, marketing is mass persuasion. It's just another word for mass persuasion. And this reference me, copywriting is their persuasion, C5220/0. So that's interesting. That's like a link. So if I actually navigate over, we're just going to go on a little journey here, 5220/0. So if I actually navigate over here to 5220/0, I get the definition of copywriting. Okay, copywriting is the persuasion in mass persuasion. You can't multiply zeros. There's like a little footnote. Sometimes I put like with the footnotes, I put like the reference to that on the back. I've stopped doing that. I did this. This was created probably in like 2021. This card, which again shows you the basically long-term knowledge development in practice, right? Like I'm refreshing on all of this and all these links that I created back in 2021, right? And then definitions of copywriting, I actually, crossed that out. Never mind, I misread the blog post too quickly, 5281/0 for definition of advertising, right? These are all, which is great about this. It's kind of like blockchain development. And anyone who's a software developer knows what the hell I'm talking about. In blockchain development, there's no, if you make a mistake, there's no like going back and reverting the mistake and editing it. You see it stamped in the blockchain, in history. And that's essentially what this is right here. I'm seeing all of my mistakes in thoughts recorded over time and how they've evolved, which is perfect because, and I've talked about this in the book, if and when I decide to write about the definition of copywriting or advertising, I can say, some people may misquote, like copywriting for this. And I'll say that some people may misquote because I have done that. And in fact, here is the proper definition of advertising, and then point to that card, 5281/0. You see? So that's another example. Like I'm basically stamping in time my thought development and knowledge development, that really occurred in 2021. It's basically, in order to create that type of thinking, it's imagine like a GitHub code commits where you can see the history and code changes. That's what essentially this is in analog form, which is so powerful because you can like navigate spatially around it and memorize things way better. Okay. So anyway, definitions of advertising. Advertising is multiple salesmanship. I'm going to put this down right here. And then I got this card that says the greatest risk of all is the risk of unnoticed. That's an advertising executive. I guess I decided to put that one right there. Yeah. Good advertising is simply salesmanship multiplied. That was written by Gary Halbert in a Gary Halbert letter. Here's my like evolution of marketing and my definition of it. And so all of this stuff, by the way, when I'm writing this down, here's an example of short-term. This is short-term knowledge development. Is I didn't have this figured out until I actually wrote this down. I was developing my thoughts and all of these things to get them out on paper and to develop it in the short term. Okay, so that's what I mean by short-term knowledge development, the act of actually writing things down by hand and drafting things. Advertising is salesmanship in print, right? This comes from like the book Breakthrough Advertising. And then here's the card that I actually created yesterday. Okay, so this is an example in my chapter called, let me move this down here. In my chapter called Creation, okay, in my Anti-Net Zettelkasten book, I talk about the different types of notes, and this is called a reflection note. I'm writing this note. This is the note I created yesterday. And let me go back. Let me actually show you where I put it, okay? So as you can see, here's all of those cards that we just reviewed together. Now I have this. Advertising is salesmanship in print, right? 5281/2A. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to actually write down an alternative definition of advertising, because we've heard this before, right? This is what that freaking guy Alen Sultanic is saying, and he's claiming, John E. Kennedy said it, right? This is not a proper and good definition, okay? This is my point. So what I'm going to do is I created the card at 5281, instead of /2A, I created it at 5281/2B, as you can see right there, okay? So here's what I wrote down. And I wrote this as if I'm writing a paragraph that's going to go in a piece of writing, maybe a book I write eventually on marketing, advertising, something like that, or even maybe a Scott Scheper Letter newsletter, physical monthly newsletter, right? Okay, so what I wrote was, Alen Sultanic assertively claims that the copywriter John E. Kennedy's definition of advertising is the correct definition, which is salesmanship in print. And then I put that little one there. This is an XREF. So I put B.Sultanic AC, which you can see from, that's my like short code that references this book, which you can find, on the first bib card I took, you can find that bibliography information on the back, right? So B.Sultanic AC. B.Sultanic AC 130. So page 130, of that book, okay? However, that is not an accurate definition. And so what this allows me to do, by the way, is whenever I write this, I actually have a footnote reference easily that I can create to back it up, right? Then I write, however, this is not an accurate definition. Salesmanship in print is the definition of copywriting. And then I link to, I like to use green, I link to 5220/0 and also 5200/0, all right? Advertising is actually an act of broadcasting the copywriter or copywritten message in order to get attention. See the Latin root. Advertising is to turn, ad plus vertere, and then attention onto your copywritten message. Okay. And then the next card I created to elaborate on this, I went to the etymological definition of advertising, and I looked it up, and I referenced this R. etim.ad. That's a tag I use in Zotero. So whenever I, because it came from an online source. So whenever I want to reference something in Zotero, I do an R, which means that's just a prepend to reference. That just tells me to Zotero. My digital reference manager. And I did R dot instead of Z dot in case I want to switch from Zotero to, there's a bunch of other ones like Paperpile, all the other ones. I've tried all of them, and I've always just gone back to Zotero. It's not perfect, but hey, it works. So I looked up advertising defined, and it actually derives from the Latin term advertere, okay? And ad means to, and vertere means to turn, meaning to turn attention to. So that's what advertising means. That's the definition. And it's so funny. Even some of the most brilliant marketers like Alen Sultanic in this book, he's gotten it wrong. This Johnny Kennedy dipshit from, 1910, he also got it wrong. Just because you're assertive in what you claim doesn't mean you're right, okay? So they were close. They were very close, but actually advertising is actually an act, right? To turn attention to, from the Latin phrase, okay? So what I'm doing right here is this is also short-term knowledge development. I'm getting my ideas out here, okay? And then I'm also saying, okay, also see 5220/0. So let me just show you what that is, 5220/0, okay? So there's 5220/0. We already actually looked that up. That's that whole copywriting definition there. Let me pull this up here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the other thing is it referenced me to 5200 right here. So this is the interesting one. This is, definition of marketing, right? This is another example of short-term knowledge development. Is my definition of marketing. Marketing is the disciplinary field of mass persuasion. Advertising equals the mass, like to turn your attention to, and copywriting equals persuasion. So advertising is actually the function of turning attention to a persuasive message. It is an activity, it is the process. And I have all these references kind of backing this up in even more things, right? So this, again, shows you hand in hand how this is short-term knowledge development. Me going here and actually creating more and elaborating more is the act of long-term knowledge development. I'm developing, basically these thoughts, which have kind of evolved over time, over years, right? And percolated. And like the reason why I'm able to recall that I actually wrote this down and came upon this is because I spent so much time on this. I didn't just copy and paste bullshit into Obsidian or into a digital file, or even written bullshit into a digital form. Like when you write and you see fonts in digital form, you don't really remember it. When you actually write down and diagram and create diagrams like this right here, you're able to develop your knowledge and your memory in the short term, okay? And also be able to recall it for long-term knowledge development. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight and practical example of what I mean. If you want to read more about this whole concept, refer to chapter 12 in my book, Knowledge Development. Specifically, this entire section, I go through there's actually 4 phases of knowledge development. I'll just show you the diagram right here. These 4 phases of knowledge development are go through every single phase of developing knowledge, what I've just done right here in conceptual form. So hopefully that provides you some insight, some value. I'm kind of freaking out of breath from talking to you freaking shit weasels. The bottom line is, basically hit the subscribe button, and also make sure you purchase my Anti-Net Zettelkasten book. And most importantly, purchase the Scott Scheper Letter, which is my physical monthly newsletter. A freaking A. Issue number 11 is coming out soon. It's going to be an absolute banger. So anyway, peace and love. Hope this taught you something valuable. And always remember to stay crispy, my friend. Peace.